Well, hello. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you here. My name is Seraphina Coleman. I'm just recently come into town, so it's a real pleasure to meet all you new folks here in Prairie Town. My husband and I got into town yesterday. We've been traveling from the East Coast on our way to Chicago, Illinois. It's a rather new little town. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an up-and-coming place. But on our way, we've been stopping at little towns like Prairie Town, performing, trying to earn room and board and money to buy supplies to get us on our way to Chicago. So we will be hosting a performance this evening in Prairie Town at about 7 p.m. So I will hope that we'll see you all there this evening. But until then, I'm having a lovely time viewing this quaint little town, getting to know its streets, and meeting all the people who live here. There's some very, very interesting characters, which is probably the best part about traveling. Now, if you are planning to attend the performance this evening, it will be at 7 p.m., as I earlier stated. It will be about 25 cents for tickets. So 25 cents for adults, and then for children, it'll be half price, so 12.5 cents. And that will give you an evening's worth of entertainments. My husband Charles and I, who are the founders of our acting troupe, and we are also the only members of our acting troupe currently, but that will change eventually. My husband Charles and I have prepared quite an array of entertainments for you today. Now, as there are only two of us, we unfortunately can't perform many full plays for you, but we figured for a small town you would be delighted to get any entertainment you could get, so you might not ask for a full play. Now, as for the shows that we'll be performing bits and pieces from different works. Now, I'm going to need to spend the day in town to see what it is people find agreeable. We've been warned that people in this part of the country can object to theatrical entertainments. They might not think that they're wholesome and moral for the whole family. So we are making sure that we choose only the finest and most moral entertainments for you. So of course we'll be performing scenes from William Shakespeare. I think nobody could object to the artistry of Mr. Shakespeare. We might perform, it's springtime, so something like, people like a comedy. So I doubt we'll play any heavy dramas, anything like Hamlet or Macbeth. Instead, maybe something like Twelfth Night, As You Like It, A Midsummer Night's Dream. In between all the scenes that we'll be performing, which we have yet to choose, we'll probably do some songs and some dances as well. It just depends on what people want. But we have been rather worried traveling as we go. Of course, we come from the East Coast. My husband was born in Pennsylvania, and I was born in Richmond, Virginia. So things are so much different here out on the western frontier. Now, how are the folks in town handling your acting troupe being in town? Does everyone like actors? Well, like I said, we only got in last night, so I can't say that I can speak for the entire populace of Prairie Town, Indiana. I will say we've been very well received by some of the citizens. Dr. Campbell and his wife, Mrs. Campbell, if you've met them, they have been incredibly generous towards us. They encouraged us, actually, to come to Prairie Town. When they heard that we were traveling across the state, they encouraged us to stop and present our theatrical delights for the town. I think they're very, very interested in making sure that the young town has some culture to it, that it gets proper entertainments befitting a town of its stature. So the Campbells have been very, very supportive. And the Zimmermans, who run the local inn, the Golden Eagle, that's where we've been staying, they've been very, very kind to us as well. We have run into some people who've expressed reservations about our work. Now, that's not just here in Indiana, that can be about anywhere. People get a little bit wary about actors. They think that maybe they're not good and moral company because the men and women travel in mixed company and they travel so often instead of setting down roots. So some folks in town, I won't name names, because I wish to remain on good terms with everybody and hope that everybody will come see the show. But some folks have been a little less than welcoming. But I will say that's been in the minority. Now, Are we taking any new members? Now, Charles and I would be more than happy to take on new members. Currently, it's just him and me, and our son, Porter, he's 9 now, so he's just old enough to start playing some of the children's roles and the bit parts in plays, which has been very, very helpful. But we've traveled with other traveling troupes in the past, and there's always been disagreements about who should get what roles, who should be playing the lead, and who should be playing the side parts. Disagreements about how the money should be split up, or where we should go next. So we've always ended up splitting from the troupes we've traveled with before, but I think that we would love to see some more members, and then we could put on some very big entertainments that we're kind of limited from right now. So if you happen to know any fine actors in Prairie Town or the surrounding area who might enjoy living on the road, the adventure and the allure of the stage, seeing the brand new city of Chicago, and maybe not making quite a lot of money just right now, then certainly send them our way, because we would love to expand our troupe. Now let's see what else people have to say. Howdy from South Bend, Indiana. I'm originally from Arizona. Oh my goodness. Well, I can't tell you that I know much about Indiana geography, having come from Virginia, but I do appreciate you coming to join us today. It sounds like you're a traveler as well. Where are you staying now in Prairie Town? Well, we have taken the private room at the Golden Eagle Inn in Prairie Town. Now, my husband and I have traveled quite a bit to get here, and we have quite a bit of traveling in front of us to get to Chicago. So I will tell you that if you need a place to stay, the Golden Eagle Inn has been lovely. It's been much finer than most establishments we've seen along the way. It's clean, the food is very, very good, so you can count on having Mrs. Zimmerman as a fine, fine cook. And the prices are fair, so they've been very fair with us and with their dealings. And like I mentioned, some folks are not as kind toward actors as others can be, especially here out west. So we've been very, very grateful that the Zimmermans have been so kind to us. Now, I hear some folks don't agree that women should be actresses. Well, Miss Krogmeyer, that is unfortunately true. Some folks don't believe that women should be actresses, especially since the feeling that acting is frivolous, that theater and acting and plays are frivolous and immoral. That makes some folks think that it would be especially frivolous and immoral for women to maintain roles as actresses in plays. Now, luckily, my family has never thought that way. My family has always been avid theater goers, and when my husband first came to town and we saw him perform, my parents did not dissuade him from courting. Now, they didn't take offense to the fact that he was an actor at all, which I'd say isn't very common of most people. What is your favorite play to perform? Oh goodness, I like so many of them. I do like The Contrast by Royal Tyler. It's a comedic piece about life in America just after the war with Britain. So I like that one very much. But as far as William Shakespeare's plays go, which we perform quite a bit of, I like As You Like It. It's a light comedy. There's a lovely, lovely part for a leading lady, which I won't say that I'm always the leading lady, but I will say I am frequently the leading lady. But the part of Rosalind, the leading lady, is a lovely part. So I think that As You Like It is probably my favorite play to perform. What's the most interesting place we have visited? Well, we have been all over. Most recently, we spent the winter in Cincinnati. We were part of a repertory company there. So we were part of a stable group of actors with one theater that played just a selection of plays all winter long. And I thought Cincinnati was very, very interesting. It's so far out in the west here, but it's still a bustling town. So I was very impressed with the size of Cincinnati. Somebody says fancy, the private room. Well, when we arrived in Prairie Town and got to the Golden Eagle, which was very late at night, the private room was open. So Mrs. Zimmerman said that we could have it if we wanted it, and we figured that we very certainly wanted it if we could have it. You don't get much privacy when you're on the road all the time. A lot of folks probably know, if you've traveled much, that a lot of inns you stay at, you won't have your own room. You'll be sharing a larger common room with several people. So when we get the chance to have our own room and 4 walls around us, my husband Charles and I just jump at the chance. We've been very pleased to be here in Indiana, though. This traveling life is a little bit newer to us. We only started traveling as actors about 5 years ago. Before that, we were back east. My husband and I were actors in a repertory company, which is very, very popular back east. I don't know if any of you have seen plays in maybe New York or Boston or Philadelphia, but most of those big cities there, especially Philadelphia, the seat of all theater in the country, most of those cities have big, finely decorated theaters that can attract thousands of people a night. So we were in a repertory company at one of those theaters where we were part of a cast. So each of us was assigned a kind of role, and we would have a select rotation of plays that we played throughout the season. So, for instance, one person was assigned to do the old man roles, and I was assigned to do the leading lady roles. Now, part of the reason why my husband wanted to take to the road and try out the western frontier was because he had been put on some of the servant roles, and he didn't think that really befit his talent. Which I would have to agree with him. Mr. Coleman, my husband, is a very, very talented man, and it's hard to raise up in the ranks of a repertory theater, so he felt his talents were being wasted playing only servant roles the whole time, so he thought we would have better luck if we took to the road and headed out west, where there were more opportunities. Because as my husband says, the best way to be the most talented actor in a city is to be the only actor in the city. So we thought this new young town of Chicago, where they're apparently starved for entertainment, would need enterprising and talented and hardworking actors like ourselves. So we hope to make it there, make a name for ourselves, perhaps establish a theater and a company of our own. I think we would like that very much. And after all the traveling we've done for the last 5 years or so, I think I would like to settle down in one place for a while. I like the open road, I like my lifestyle, but I think it would be nice to be able to settle down with our 2 children, have one theater we work at, and find a home for ourselves someplace. Let's see if there are any questions. Very good. Somebody says hello. Hello to you as well. Have you always wanted to be an actress? Did you put on shows as a child? Well, I've always been fascinated with acting. My family, they aren't actors. My father's a lawyer. But we attended plays as frequently as we could when I was a child. So I would often make my sisters join me in playing plays. I would make them play the pirates and the brigands, and then I would play the princess that would be rescued. Oftentimes they revolted against my plays because they thought that the parts should be distributed more equally. But I was just trying to introduce them to a repertory theater system and how life as a professional actor would work. They didn't seem to appreciate it. Have people kicked you out of a town on religious grounds? We have never been, to use your phrase, kicked out of a town. Now we have been, it has been insinuated that we are not welcome in a town before. And based on those feelings, we've decided we're not even going to try to go to Indianapolis. It's one of the larger cities in the area, but we just think that the feeling will be against us there. Many towns just want assurance that we're going to provide good moral entertainment, something that the women and the children in the town can enjoy. And some towns don't want to deal with us at all. But we've never been kicked out. Mostly we just noticed that attendance at the theater is not so great as we would hope that evening. And we usually take that as a sign to move on to the next town. Do you have a favorite genre? Well, I love romances. I like melodramas. I like the kinds of plays where everybody ends up happy at the end, they're laughing, usually somebody gets married, that kind of play. My husband, on the other hand, he prefers dark dramas. He likes to do a performance where he gets to rage against the storm in a thundering voice, and he's very good at it. But his idea of a good play is usually one in which someone loses a limb, which I confess isn't my favorite kind of play. Hello, I'm from Greenfield, Indiana, and I've been to Prairie last year with a friend, and we enjoyed it. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your visit to Prairie Town. I think that it's a thriving little town. I wouldn't be surprised to see it really pick up in these next coming years. We've been quite enjoying our visit, too. What else? It sounds like you came from a progressive family. What are your thoughts on women's rights in this country? Well, I don't know that I've quite thought about it very much. I mean, I've always lived in a man's household, so I left my father's household where, while he was very indulgent of me, I never really thought of disagreeing with his plans for me or what he wanted from us. And then I moved into my husband's household, a traveling household at that, and I've never thought about going against what Charles wanted. Now, I will say that both my father and my husband have always been very considerate of what I wanted. So usually Mr. Coleman and I discuss together where it is we would like to move on to next, because he's always taking my opinion and the children's needs into account when he makes choices. But at the end of the day, it remains his choice, and I think that's what's proper. I think it's proper that a man remains at the head of the household, but I think it's important that he remembers that in that household he has a partner, a very fine partner in that, and that he should always ask her guidance as well. So that's a very good question. How many days will you be performing in Prairie Town? Well, right now we just have the plans for the one performance. I've heard there's 100 to 200 people in and around Prairie Town, so I don't know how many performances we'd be able to sustain. But if we had a strong audience tonight, lots of people who were very, very excited and enjoyed the work, and if they asked for another performance, I suppose we'd have to extend our stay. As long as it's profitable, we'll probably stay in town. And as any actor will tell you, the most important thing is to follow what the audience wants. It doesn't matter how well you perform a play if nobody wants to see that play. So when it comes to choosing the play that you're going to perform, it's best to get an idea of what the audience you're catering to would like. Or if you're performing and you make a particular speech that the audience loves and demands you play it again, which they will. Audiences will be very vocal. Sometimes it's in your best interest to follow what the audience says and just repeat it again, do what they'd like. So if we get the demand from the citizens of Prairie Town, we'll certainly stay a couple of days, but we can't be here too long. We would like to make sure that we're well settled in Chicago by winter. Do you have a name for our acting troupe? Well, as right now it's just Mr. Coleman and I. We've been calling ourselves the Colemans, which, as you can tell, doesn't have quite the flair that we would like. So I've been playing with different ideas, some alliteration to spice up the title. Something like the Coleman's comedic troupe of contrarians. No, that's not good. We don't want actors to be contrary. So as you can see, the name is something we're still working on. I'll let you know if I think of something better. Or if you have a better suggestion, please let me know and I'll pass it on to Mr. Coleman. Do your children ever perform with you? Yes. So we do have two children. We've got Porter and Carolina, who was actually born in South Carolina, hence the name. Now Porter is 9 years old and Carolina is 5. So she's a little young yet, but Porter certainly does play some of the child roles, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream. There's a fairy child that the two fairies are fighting over, so he's played that role before, and I think he likes it. He likes being on stage, especially when he gets to be with us, and it makes sure that he's not in trouble when we're trying to perform. So they often do perform with us when we can find a role for them. Your hair is quite pretty. Do you always dress your hair? Well, thank you very much. I do try to look my best. It is hard. I'll try to give you a better look at it. I'm not sure the light's good. It is hard when you're on the road to stay fresh and well-maintained like this. But I do make it a point, because we're going into new towns every day almost, and it's important for us to put our best foot forward. Because imagine you live in a small town and a troop of strangers comes in and they're dressed ragged and dirty and look rather disreputable. Then of course you're not going to trust them to stay in your town, to present good and moral works to your people. So I think that it's important, if I'm going to travel from town to town, to look put together, to look respectable like a lady, so they know that my husband and I are good, respectable people who provide good, respectable entertainment. Do you feel women should have the right to vote and make their ideas known? Well, I haven't thought much about it, I suppose. I just don't see the need to vote, really. Because if I were to vote, I would probably vote for the same person that my husband voted for, so that would just be 2 votes for the same person. And I don't know how that would help. Everybody would just double their votes on the same person. Because I don't know about you, but I think it would be foolish to marry a person who wouldn't vote in your best interest. So if you think the man you're marrying isn't voting for the person that you would vote for yourself, then I don't know why you would be marrying him. No, I don't concern myself much with politics. I think it's important for women to maintain a good moral background to raise their children in. And I don't think that's possible when they sully themselves by immersing themselves in the world of politics. They're supposed to be the moral background of the family, so we leave that kind of work to the men to deal with. Have you worked with 2 amateur actresses by the name of Dorcas and Nanny? You know, I haven't met them. Are they local? Because if they're good talents and they are looking for work, we would certainly love to bring them along with us to Chicago. Just think, if we had 4 people in the troupe, plus a little porter, the plays we could put on. Yes, please, if you see Miss Dorcas and Miss Nanny, do send them my way. I would love to hear more from them. Do you have different costumes for the different characters you play? Well, normally we would... Usually when we perform, we just wear very nice clothing. You dress up very nicely so that they know that you're performing. Now, if we were part of one of the bigger repertory theaters back east with more money, we would have more elaborate costumes. So there would be different costumes for every character to differentiate which character they're playing, and maybe to tell something about them, to show where they came from, or how old they are, or what social class they are, because those things can all be told by the costumes you wear. But because it's currently just the 2 of us and our coin is rather limited, we usually just wear our nicest clothes so that people know that we are a special event to come to, and they understand that this is a big event. Dorcas and Nanny will be in touch. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much, Mrs. Serger. I'll be glad to hear from them. Hopefully our troop will be growing in the next few days. That might make staying in Prairie Town a few days worth it. Very good. We have so enjoyed coming to Prairie Town. It's been a good experience for us. Traveling can be wearying, but it's nice to come to a small town, enjoy some of nature's beauties that you might not see when you're in the bigger cities. So it's been refreshing for us. As an actor, what are your favorite emotions to portray? Well, I don't know. There's so many that I'm good at. Let me see. Here, I'll give you a short demonstration. Maybe if you see, you'll be more tempted to come to the performance this evening. I'm rather good at longing. So... Did you catch that? So that's my gaze of longing. I'm very, very good at that one. I'm also rather good at surprise. So surprise is going to be made by holding one hand to the cheek, the other hand on your bosom, and gasping in surprise. Oh, wasn't that lovely? So yes, those are probably my 2 favorites to portray. Does your husband ever play a female character? No, he doesn't really, not really anymore. do actors usually do that kind of thing. Now, I know back in the time of Mr. Shakespeare, it was quite common for all roles to be played by men, because there were laws against women performing in theaters. And so we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. There's still a little bit of a feeling against female actresses still, I think. And I think part of it is holdover from laws like that, when women were actually barred from performing at all. So you are very, very right. At one point, all the roles were played by men. And usually female roles would be played by very young men. Maybe teenagers who hadn't quite grown in their beards fully yet. When their voices are still a little higher, they would usually play female roles. But in more modern times, usually those roles are just played by actresses now. So my husband has never played a female character, but that's a very good question. Do you teach acting to the local youth in town? Well, I think that I would very much like to teach acting to the youth. As you can imagine, going from place to place, doing performances when we can, in whatever spaces we can, if the local population approves of it, means that income can be rather spotty for us. It comes and it goes, so we don't have any constant stream of income. So between acting performances, my husband and I take on a variety of odd jobs to support ourselves. So he has experience as a store clerk, so sometimes he'll clerk at a store for a season or so to support us. And both of us will teach acting and singing and dancing lessons to anybody who will pay for them, because we figure that while we're not sharing our performances on the stage, we can share our talents and our passions in other ways as well. So certainly, if you know any local youth in town who would like to learn to act or sing or dance, you may certainly send them to us, and we will make sure they receive a full education. For a mere 25 cents, we'll give them a full lesson. Do you have favorite hobbies when you are not traveling? Well, I do enjoy spending quiet time with my family. Because we're on the road so often, it means that we're always busy, always moving from one place to the other. So when I get a chance to spend some quiet time with my husband and my 2 children, maybe go see a play ourselves when we're not in one, I really enjoy that. I also enjoy reading. I like reading plays to find new roles that I might not have played yet. And I like novels as well. So probably reading and spending time with my family are my favorite things. I really felt you were surprised. Thank you very much. I've been told several times I'm a very, very fine actress, so I don't have to say it myself and brag. But I appreciate your praise. Maybe that will tempt you to come out to the performance this evening. I'm sure if you like it, I will work in a way to be surprised so that you can enjoy that again. Are you into the art of pantomime? Actors have branched out more recently into all kinds of performances, especially traveling actors coming to small towns like we are, usually don't have the means or the number of actors in their troupe that they need to put on full performances with beautiful set pieces and gorgeous costumes and all that kind of spectacle. So actors often turn to other things, pantomimes, comedic skits, singing, dancing. Some people do circus tricks, or they bring curiosities with them, interesting things they might charge people money to come see. So a lot of actors will do things other than just acting in traditional performances when they're traveling to supplement what they can't necessarily do like they would in a large theater. Very good question. Karen Carter has waved hello. I would like to wave back. Do you have stage sets and or set pieces that you use and carry with you? We do not have any stage sets or set pieces that we carry with us. Now back east, that's a little different. In the big theaters in the big cities, they will have painted backdrops, so cloth backdrops that have been painted with different locations that will help them set the scene. So each theater usually has an outdoors one, an indoors one, maybe a palace and a garden, just to set a few different scenes that might work for several different plays, instead of painting one specifically for each play. They'll also usually have a set of furniture. So usually a chair, a couple of chairs, a table, that kind of thing, that can be used for many different sets. So you always have the makings for making a living room or a kitchen or a garden, no matter what. Now, since we are traveling ourselves and there's only the two of us, we often have to find our way in many different ways. So we've taken flatboats, we've taken the canals, we've walked, we've ridden in wagons, we've taken stagecoaches. We've taken many different ways to get here to Indiana from the east. So it really wasn't plausible for us to bring drops and set pieces with us. So usually we just make our way and set up wherever the town will put us. So it could be that we'll be performing in the common room of an inn or a local person's house, maybe a meeting hall that they don't have use for. On particularly fine evenings, sometimes we might even perform outside. So that's part of getting to town and setting up, is finding a place we might perform. I understand you have a lovely singing voice. Might you sing something for us? You know, I would love to when you come to the performance this evening. Only 25 cents a person and 12.5 cents for children. At that time, I will be more than glad to sing something for you. Did you go to school, or did someone in your family teach you to read? Now, I did go to school. My father's a lawyer, so he believes very much that education is important. And my family, my life growing up was a lot more settled than my life is now. So I did go to school as well as my sisters. Now my children, though I believe very much in education, my children, since we moved from place to place, haven't had the chance to go to school consistently. If we're in a town for the winter, like we were last year, in Cincinnati, performing at a repertory theater for the winter season. If we're doing that, then they'll have a chance to stay in town and go to a school if there's one available. But if there isn't, I teach them on our way. So we make school wherever we need to, though it's nice when there's an established school they can go to. What happened to make you not want to go to Indianapolis? Well, nothing happened to it. We've never been to Indianapolis, so all of what I'm saying is based on hearsay and supposition. We've never been to Indianapolis. We were just warned when we came out to the western states that people can be intolerant of actors, that people view acting and theater as frivolous at best or morally bankrupt at worst. And they think that actors can be anything from con men to thieves and all other sorts of not good things. So we were told that sentiment can be particularly strong in Indiana. So we thought we didn't want to go to one of the bigger cities, just for our own safety and the safety of our children. Besides, it was not very good for the purse if you go to a city that doesn't really want you there. So we figured we would find smaller communities that might be more welcoming to meeting us and paying to see our performances. Do you and your husband ever argue about how a character should be portrayed? Yes. Well, we recently had quite the argument. We were recently in a town where he wanted to play, I wanted to play scenes from Romeo and Juliet. And he told me that I was too old to be playing Juliet anymore. As you can imagine, I was displeased. So we've had arguments like that before. We do favor different acting styles. My husband has the most lovely booming voice, so he likes to perform pieces where he can showcase his loud and booming voice, while I prefer sweeter, gentler pieces, things that other ladies would like. So we do sometimes have arguments, but usually we unite over the fact that we believe so fully in bringing the arts and culture and theater to these small Indiana towns. Do you have a preferred way of travel? Anything that's not on foot is my preference, but I'm finding more and more often that walking is a large part of getting west. So if I can take a stagecoach, I would prefer that to get off my feet for a few hours. But I will say there is There is no comfortable way to travel. It is an uncomfortable experience no matter how you do it. So I think that's part of why I'll be glad to get back to Chicago. Not back to arrive in Chicago, I suppose, and hopefully settle down for a little bit. It was nice being in Cincinnati this past winter and getting a chance to rest and be in one place, so I think after traveling for a while, I'll be glad to settle down in Chicago. Well, hello to you too. Somebody said hello. Do a lot of girls go to school? It depends on where you go, what the town feeling is, and what the feeling of individual parents are. There are many people like my parents who think that education is an asset to everybody, including women. That it's important for women to be well educated because they're going to raise and take care of a household. And if they're going to raise good educated members of society, they need to be good educated members of society themselves. While there are other people who think that because a woman won't be going necessarily out into the world to make a trade, she won't be a lawyer or a shopkeeper or a doctor, that she doesn't need to learn how to read. It's not necessary, and it takes time away from learning other vital skills like cooking and cleaning, maintaining a household, sewing, knitting, raising children. But I do think that it's important for girls to go to school if they can, or to get an education somehow, because you can't raise the kind of people you want to see in society if you yourself are not the kind of person you want to see. So if you want to see an educated and thoughtful society, then you need to be that kind of person yourself. What is your favorite play? Well, I mentioned earlier that I think one of my favorite plays, which I actually have right here, is As You Like It by William Shakespeare. I suppose it's not on the front. It's on the side there. As You Like It by William Shakespeare. It's just such a sweet comedy, and there, well, I wouldn't want to spoil the ending for you, but you've likely seen it already. There's 3 weddings at the end, and I love a good wedding, so any play that ends in 3 weddings is a good play by me. How rude of him. Exactly! I assume that you're referring to my husband saying I was too old to play Juliet. I would say that's very rude indeed. I know she's supposed to be a 14, but I don't say I look a day over 20, and that's young enough, I would think. We haven't had that argument since, though. We usually just avoid Romeo and Juliet now. Why Chicago? I hear that some folks think it's just a swampland. I have heard it's still a little rough. It was founded just a few years ago, so it's a very, very new city. But since it's so new, the local acting scene is wide open. That means they don't have any established theaters. They don't have established actors and troupes, and we are hoping to fill that void. We've heard they're positively starved for entertainment, and we're hoping that if we can be there and be the first and, of course, the best actors there, we can really establish ourselves. Part of what was so hard about making a living back east as an actor is there's so many established playhouses and established actors that it's almost impossible for a new actor to make a start there. So that's why we took to the road, and we're hoping we can start something new for ourselves in Chicago. It might not be the most comfortable city we've ever lived, certainly not as comfortable as, say, Philadelphia, but hopefully with time we'll be able to grow up with the city and make a place for ourselves there. Would you like to make Chicago your permanent home? Well, if things worked well, I would like Chicago to become our home. I would like very much to have a place to settle down for a while. Because it's nice being in one place, to get neighbors, to have people around you're comfortable with, and have a place to raise our children. Like I mentioned, they don't always get to go to school because we're on the road so much, so if we settled in one place, maybe they'd have more opportunity for that. What else? Are you looking downtown Chicago or on the outskirts? Well, I can't say that I know much about the geography of Chicago because I haven't been there myself, but I would hope right in the thick of things. That's where we'll build our theatrical empire. But I suppose it depends on what's available there. We'll perform any place that's available, any place we're requested at, so wherever people will pay us to act is where we would like to settle.
Does anyone struggle when... Oh, well, I do struggle sometimes with many things. And it seemed like you struggled with that question. Oh, there we are. Does anyone struggle when you give them acting lessons? Oh, certainly. Certainly. And there are some folks who bring their children to acting lessons thinking they have a young prodigy on their hands. And then you spend an hour teaching them and realize that they haven't learned a thing. And goodness, they'll probably never will learn a thing about acting. There is some parts of it that are just naturally born. Of course, you have to work hard to become a good actor and succeed in this business. But I do think there are some things that are just... innate talent, and I have certainly tried to teach some people that do not have the innate talent, but their money is as good as anybody else's, so even if it's a struggle, I will continue to teach them as long as they continue to pay. Shakespeare theater is the question? Yes. So the works of William Shakespeare are very, very popular, so we often perform those. There are also many other works that are popular. The works of Mr. Molière. The School for Scandal is a very popular play. That one gets played very often. I'd rather like to play Lady Sneerwell from the School for Scandal if we ever get an opportunity to work with a full troupe again. There are also playwrights working at local theaters as well. So in the theaters back east, along with their cast of actors, many of those theaters also employ their own playwrights as well, and theater managers. So those playwrights will write new plays for the theaters. So the actors back there get to perform quite a few more new plays. And those playwrights get paid along with the actors based on performances. So usually the third night of the performance of a new play, all the profits go to the playwright of that play. So if a play is unpopular enough that it only runs for 2 nights, very often the playwright doesn't get paid, unfortunately. So yes, we do perform a lot of Shakespeare out here because, as I mentioned, it's only my husband and I and our 2 children, so we don't really have anybody with us who's writing our plays. And even if we did, we don't have enough people really to fill out a full cast of plays. Unless you can find a playwright who's willing to write 2-person plays, then certainly, by all means, then send them our way. How old are your kids? Well, my children, my oldest is Porter, who's 9 years old, and my youngest is Carolina, who is 5 years old. They really enjoy, I think, traveling around with us. There's always something new and exciting to see. I grew up in one city. I grew up in Richmond, so I didn't get that kind of experience when I was a child, but I must imagine it's an exciting way to grow up. Always seeing so many cities. They'll have seen so much of the world before they're even 10 years old, much more than most folks see. So I think that would be a nice way to grow up. I hope it is a nice way for them to grow up. Have you performed any new memorable plays? Well, let me think. None that come to mind. I will tell you, I feel like we've gotten close talking for the last, quarter of an hour or so. So I will tell you that many of the new plays produced often feel like repeats of the same thing. And I hate to say it, I'm sure it's very difficult to write a new play. But many of the plays, it's repetition of the same themes. There's always a dispute about who somebody is, so a mistaken identity. There are 2 people who are in love, but one of them's actually lying to the other, and the other one's destined for another person. They find out about their trickery, and the honest people get married at the end. So I have to say that there aren't any new memorable plays coming out because they just repeat the same thing. Ever since School for Scandal was written years and years ago, it feels like people have just written iterations of that over and over again. So if you are looking to write plays, I would love to hear something memorable and new. If you'd like to write for us, you come talk to us, all right? Would you hire a nanny? Well, it would be nice to hire somebody to help me with the children, especially when we're performing, because how often I can perform depends on my children. Now that they're getting a little older, especially Carolina, she's almost getting to an age where she's a little more self-sufficient. I can perform a little bit more, but when they were babies, I couldn't do much performing because I had to be by their side all the time. Now, when we travel with a larger troupe, which we do sometimes, we'll find other people to work with. Sometimes it's more possible than for me to perform because other members of the troupe will watch the children while I'm on stage. But it all just depends on what we have. We don't really have a lot of extra coin, and since we're trying to not only pay the expenses to make it to Chicago, but also to set up there a little more permanently, we're trying to save every bit of money that we can, so we don't really have the extra resources to hire a nanny. Even though that might be very useful for my acting career, it's just not a financial possibility right now. Do you often get chased out of town because your career choice is questionable? This is the second time somebody has asked that. I think people are very worried. I hope that I'm not offending you all by my loose tongue. I wouldn't hate to say that I'm gossiping or anything like that, or raising questionable subject matter that makes you wonder if I get chased out of town very often. But no, I mentioned before, we've never been chased out of town, but we certainly have put on performances in towns where you can tell that their hearts are not with us, that their sentiments are not with us, and they would prefer we left. That's why it's nice to perform in a smaller town like Prairie town. You might not get as big of audiences, but like I've spent today, you can spend some time getting to know the people in town and then tailoring what kind of performances you do around their sentiments. So here in Prairie town, I think that people would love to see a moral tale, something where good, honest, hard-working people triumph over the vain, flippant people. So I think we might do some scenes from The Contrast, which talks about good American values and hard work and honesty. And I think the people of Prairie Town will very much enjoy that. What is your opinion on Edwin Forrest? Well, I've never gotten to see him perform. I've heard he's incredible. I would love to see him. People certainly like him better than they do Edmund Kean, so I would certainly like to see him perform. But it's honestly people like him that make it so hard to make a living back east. I told you we had been repertory members in a repertory company before, but most companies aren't doing repertory works anymore. They'll just hire stars coming in from Europe. So the big names, the actors that everybody wants to see perform, like Mr. Kean or Mr. Forrest. And that doesn't really leave a lot of space for local actors to make their mark. So we're hoping that, as lovely as I'm sure Mr. Forrest's performance is, that we'll be able to get out west far from the reach of those European stars so that we might be able to make our own mark and perhaps find our own fame. Do a lot of kids go to see your plays? We do have some children. Back east it's not terribly common. But theater going back east is so much different than it is here on the frontier. Back east there's usually, at the very fine theaters, the well-decorated ones, there's usually 3 tiers. So there's the pit. The lowest level, closest to the stage, is for the middle and working class people. Then behind that there's a section of box seating that's for the upper class people who pay quite a bit more for their tickets. And then above that there's the cheaper seats in the gallery for the lower class people. And at those shows you don't see hardly any children, and often not very many ladies either. There's a lot of young men going to see plays, a lot of businessmen wanting to be seen and that kind of thing. So certainly back east we don't see a lot of children in plays. But here on the western frontier, when we're usually performing in maybe somebody's home or a crowded inn, you might see more children. I think that there's less distinctions out west than there is back east between people, so it's more likely to see men and women, people of all classes, in one place together gathering for entertainment. With so few choices for entertainment, I think everybody in town is more likely to come out than they would back east where there's so many choices of things to do. I would be wary of Mrs. Campbell. I hear she has great opinions towards women and acting. Does that mean great as in very good? She enjoys women in acting? Or does that mean great as in she has a lot of them and I might not like to hear them? Because if so, I might give her a bit of a berth. I certainly, since Mr. Campbell, or Dr. Campbell, pardon me, we're new in town, since Dr. Campbell has been our benefactor, the one who's promised to pay us and guide our way here in town, and he's the one who invited us here. I want to express my gratitude to him in any way, and I certainly wouldn't want to offend his wife, so if she does not think that women should be acting, maybe I'll give her a wide berth. I was actually reading a bit. I told you that my favorite play is As You Like It, and I was reading a bit of that play before you all got here. Would you like to hear a section of it? This line is read by Celia. All right. I just think it's beautiful. Why should this desert be? For it is unpeopled? No. Tongues all hang on every tree that shall civil sayings show. Some, how brief the life of man runs his erring pilgrimage, that the stretching of a span buckles in his sum of age. Some of violated vows, twixt the souls of friend and friend. But upon the fairest boughs, or at every sentence end, will I, Rosalinda, write, teaching all that read to know the quintessence of every sprite heaven would in little show. Therefore, heaven nature charged that one body should be filled with all graces wide enlarged, nature presently distilled, Helen's cheek, but not her heart, Cleopatra's majesty, Atalanta's better part, sad Lucretia's modesty. Thus Rosalind of many parts by heavenly synod was devised, of many faces, eyes, and hearts, to have the touches dearest prized. Heaven would that she these gifts should have, and I to live and die her slave. That's why it's one of my favorite plays. Words like that is true poetry and true romance there. It's probably my favorite part about being an actor, is all that beautiful language. Let me see, what else? Oh, okay, more information about Mrs. Campbell. No, not so much. I hear she doesn't like them and is not willing to change how she thinks about women in theater. Well, that's really a shame. I think that Mrs. Campbell is a fine lady. I'm not trying to step on any toes or make any enemies in Prairie Town when they've been so kind to us, but I think it's really a shame that she doesn't open her mind. After all, she's from a much more urban area, I would say, coming from Lexington, Kentucky as she does. I would think that she would have more enlightened thoughts about the culture of theater and how important it is to a cultured society. But I said I'm not here to make any enemies, so I wish her very well, and if she will not change her mind, then we will just avoid each other's paths and nod politely to each other in the streets. Do you perform different mother characters for your kids or husband depending on your mood at home? Well, when we read, when we're at home, we might read plays out loud together or to each other. And sometimes it makes my children laugh if I do, say if I play old man characters and I speak to them in a creaky little old man voice. And then they laugh and laugh and laugh. So while I would never play a role like that on the stage, I might do something like that at home to make my children and my husband laugh. But no, I certainly would never play a role like that on stage. You have a beautiful voice. Well, thank you very much. My husband's voice is really the talk of our acting troupe, but I think mine's rather fine as well, so I appreciate the compliment. Oh, a round of applause for Mr. Mortel. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I can assure you that you'll see even more of that at our performance this evening. So if you enjoyed that, it'll be well worth your 25 cents to come to the actual performance. Do I have any hobbies? Well, like I mentioned before, I do love to read. Of course I love reading plays, but I also like novels as well. And I love spending time with my family. We're just so busy on the road moving from place to place that anytime I can sit with them and we'll read and talk, or maybe even sit quietly together and enjoy each other's company, that's my favorite thing to do. Very good. Well, I imagine that I'll probably have to be going soon. Charles and I are scouting out a place for our performance this evening, actually. Like many small towns, Prairie Town doesn't have an established theater, which is all right. So Dr. Campbell has given us a kind of a free leave to find a place to perform this evening. He's offered the porch of his own house. He's got a lovely veranda on his house, so we were thinking about performing there, which we might, though it's looking a little bit rainy, so we might find some place indoors. Mrs. Zimmerman, who runs the Golden Eagle Inn where we're staying, has also offered that we might perform in the tap room or on the porch of the Eagle, so we might do that if it gets a little rainy today. What other questions do we have? Would you use your voice for audiobooks? Well, I certainly do like to read aloud. My husband enjoys that. I think he's so used to moving that whenever he sits still for too long to read, even though he loves reading very much, he instantly falls asleep if he's sitting down for more than a quarter of an hour. So he likes me to read to him. He says he likes my voice, and it makes it easier for him to stay awake if he doesn't have to focus his tired eyes on the page. So I do like to read aloud to my children, to my husband. And like I said, sometimes I'll put on funny little voices to entertain them, but that's really only for my family. Do your kids act? Now, they are starting to act. So my oldest son, Porter, he's 9 now, and he's got quite a bit of energy, so a good way to divert that energy and keep him out of trouble when we're trying to act on stage is to bring him on stage with us. So there's always children's roles. Either servant boys he can play. I mentioned that he once very proudly played the fairy changeling child in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the one child that Titania and Oberon were fighting over. He still likes to recite his lines from that. If you've seen the play, you'll notice that that character does not have any lines, but he was so eager that we let him have a sentence or two that we made up. And he still very proudly remembers that sentence or two. So I think that Porter will be very eager to begin acting more as he gets older. In maybe 10 years or so, he'll be old enough to start taking on those young male leads, like the young lovers and things like that. So maybe we'll have him in our troupe then, which I would love to see. Performing with my family would be quite a blessing. Now my youngest, Carolina, she's a very sweet girl. She's starting to learn how to sew, and she's already very good. But she's a little shy, so I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't really take to acting when she gets older. Though it'd be lovely with somebody of her creativities to make us costumes and help us paint drop cloths for the backdrops. So there, of course, will be a place for everybody in the family in our acting troupe. Have a good show. Well, thank you, Mr. Mortel. And I recommend that you just come out to the show. Then you'll know for yourself if it was a good one or not. But I appreciate the well wishes. Looking forward to your show. We hope to see you. Maybe in the schoolhouse. That might be a good place as well. We were looking at that. If we can get the permission of Dr. Campbell to perform there, that would be lovely. It's a nice open space with lots of benches, and there's a roof overhead so that we know that we won't get rained out. So I think the schoolhouse would actually be a lovely place to do that. But I should probably go talk with Mr. Coleman, see if he's confirmed with Dr. Campbell where we'll be performing tonight. Just remember, the performance of the comedic Coleman Company of Actors, ooh, that's better, I'm working on it, will be tonight at 7 p.m. For admission, it is 25 cents per person. Children are half price, so they'll be 12.5 cents. And we welcome all that will fit in the schoolhouse, the front room of the inn, wherever it is we decide to perform. But I'm sure you won't be able to miss the performance. So if you're looking for us, just listen for Charles's booming voice and you'll be able to find us. But it has been so lovely talking with you all, and hopefully I'll get to see you tonight. All right, goodbye.